This is a book of Dylan's words from a bootleg. And on the back cover, there's a blank page here, and Larry Kegan signed it and gave it to me. Congratulations on your Jubilee year, whatever that meant. If this box set is, its creator gives you half as much inspiration and energy as it does me, you'll be around another 50 years. So this must have been my 50th birthday. Here's his signature, which was a rubber stamp, Larry Kegan.
Larry Kegan.
So I get in the van, I had it with me, and I get in the van, or Bob gets in the van with us, and I say, Bob, here's the book. Larry said, sign it, would you sign it? Sure, I'd love to. Dick, this is my record. It was made for you. How does that say? Oh yeah, no, this is my record made for you. Thanks for everything, Bob Dylan. And P.S. Congratulations on your birthday. So that it was made for you. That's what he signed on every autograph I saw from there on. So yeah, it's a good. I like it. It's I cherish it a lot. It's a little worn, but it's a cherishable thing. I love it.
My name's Dick Cohn. I live in St. Paul all my life. I now live in an area called Crocus Hill on Lincoln Avenue. I worked with my father's business for many years, and then I wound up leaving that and got involved with a company that manufactured and manufactured geodesic dome homes. Of course, Bob sang about you live in a home, you live in a dome. And then after that, I got into a design company, a group that designed trade show exhibits and retail stores and theater sets, and did that for another 20 years, and then I wound up getting involved in the retail Halloween business. I ran the Spirit Halloween stores here in the Twin City area, and we did that for 25 years, and then I retired. That's sort of my history in a nutshell. I've met a lot of interesting people. I've had a lot of fun in my life. Early on, I decided if it wasn't fun, didn't want to do it. And that's one of the reasons I left my father's business and got into some other things that were interesting. Done a lot of traveling. Married to Val, been married for 57 years. I always say 20 wonderful years. But we're still going strong. That's kind of who I am. I was born in '41, same year Bob was born. We're the same age. My birthday's in April, his is in May, so we're about a month apart. And it was common back in those days for Jewish families from the Twin Cities and other places in Minnesota and even outside of Minnesota to send their Jewish children to a camp in northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, Herzl Camp in Webster, Wisconsin. And so in the mid-50s, 55, 56, something around there, I was 13, 14 years old. went to this camp for a month. And that's where I met a lot of my friends that I knew, or some of them we knew before, and I was continued friend with them, but I met a lot of new people there at that camp and continued the relationship for a long time. Some of them I still see. It was a boy-girl camp, and Bob Zimmerman was there. That's where I met him.
What was kind of the idea behind this camp that people came from so far? Was it like a Jewish socialization
It was
thing?
definitely Jewish, but it wasn't high religion. It was socialization. It was allowing people to meet each other, girls and boys to meet each other. There was definitely, I mean, on Fridays it was Shabbos, and they had a little service or something on Friday nights where everybody was dressed in white. That was part of the thing. But it was really not a very, there was a rabbi that was there and kind of supervised everything. But yeah, it was just a socialization camp for 13, 14-year-old kids. And I got to start by saying that's where Bob Zimmerman was there, Louis Kemp was there, Larry Kegan was there, and a number of others. But those were some of the people that I was friends with. Bob was by far the coolest kid in camp. There were several. Bob, Louis, and Larry were definitely the coolest guys in camp. I was not. I definitely was not. I was thinking about that. I did have a girlfriend in camp. That was one of the things that made you more popular than the others. So I guess I was there, but I was definitely not the coolest kid in camp the way Bob and the others were.
So when you hear stories of Bob in Hibbing, he's sometimes like seen as like someone who wasn't like somebody that fit in that well. Was that like a chance for him to reinvent himself at camp?
No, he definitely fit in. He was cute, he was popular, and he was, I mean, he definitely fit in. They had a routine that one day the campers would replace the counselors or share the job with the counselors. And Bob shared the job with the music director. And that was that's very prominent in my mind that he was musical. He played the piano in the main building called the Ulum, and he played guitar. There's a great photo of Bob, Louie, and Larry, and a bunch of other guys that were there from that Herzl Camp. Larry Kegan, who was walking at that time, he eventually became paralyzed. But they were mischievous, to say the least. My mom, all her life, she'd say, "Don't run around with those guys, they're gonna get you in trouble. Stay away from that Kegan kid," you know. The famous story that Bob got up on the roof of the main building and played music all day when he was the music director position. I changed jobs with the garbage man. And so I didn't get to hang around the camp that day. I went to we picked up the garbage and we drove to town and dropped off the garbage. And on the way back from the garbage dump, I noticed a malt shop on the side of the road. And I came back and mentioned it. I said, "Hey, you know, there's a cool little malt shop a couple of miles away." Well, long story that I'm not the best one to tell. Louis Kemp, if you get an opportunity to talk with him, would be great. He's got a book out that talks about it. But basically, we stole a car from the counselors and we drove to the malt shop. And I don't remember the whole thing very well, but I do remember vividly being caught when the counselors walked into the malt shop and said, you having a good time, boys? And they took us back. I didn't get any trouble for it. Larry and Bob almost got kicked out of camp. I'm not sure how that all went down, but it was an interesting thing. I mean, that was one of my experiences with Bob at the time. Again, after camp was over, we were close enough that when he would come to the Twin Cities from Hibbing, because of social events, dances, snowball, BBG dances, AZA dances, whatever they were sponsored by the temples, and Bob would come to these dances and come to town and be with the girls down here, and he would stay at people's houses. He stayed at my house, he stayed at a lot of people's houses, and then we would go to have parties in houses after the events or during the time he was here. And he would play the piano, not very often anything new. It was always Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard and rock and roll stuff. He had a couple of songs he sang, was Annie Had a Baby. I think it was by the, I can't remember, some doo-wop group that he sang. And another one was Baby Let Me Bang Your Box by Clyde McPhatter. And that was a song about Baby Let Me Play Your Piano. And those are the two songs that I loved hearing them. I always requested them. And we got thrown out of many parties. The father and mother come down and said, all right, that's enough, you boy, you leave. And so we'd have to leave. And one time at a concert, Bob came to me and he said, so how did you like that? I said, Bob, you're great, but not as good as when you played Baby Let Me Bang Your Box in Nancy's basement. And he laughed, and several times over our conversation over the years, he'd say, tell me about that again. Remind me what that was about.
Even he didn't remember it, sure.
Yeah. But anyhow, so the camp was, again, I was really a young kid, and I really wasn't very social at all. And but I was there. I was there and part of the scene, and then continued on for many years, all through high school. Bob would come to town, and Louie would come to town. Larry was still here, and we would hang out. And I would one time. There was a card game in one of the pizza restaurants that we used to go to in the basement. And after the card game, they said, well, let's go find some women and girls at the time. And I had a car, so we drove looking around where we might find some women, and we got pulled over by the cops. And the cops thought we were there trying to buy liquor. They said, you guys trying to buy some liquor? And we said no, we didn't tell them what we were there for. But they just kind of shook us down a little bit and scared us and told us to leave. And every once in a while Bob would say, tell me about that story again too. And so, but I know it was just, he was definitely a leader. Larry Kegan was the focus point in my mind. Larry Kegan was the focus point in this town.
Did you know Larry was from St. Paul too? Did you know him before camp, or did you meet him?
I did. I knew of him. I knew him. We both went to the same Sunday school. And he, but again, he was a little bit wilder than I was. And so I did know him. And it wasn't until camp that I kind of became a little closer to Larry. And over the years, I became really close. We were, I have a picture of Bob and Larry in my phone, and I always say, here's a picture of the most remarkable guy I ever knew, and his friend Bob. Larry Kegan was truly a remarkable person. we can talk more about him.
Yeah, I have a lot
after
more questions
we
about
get
Larry.
into it a little bit.
A couple of the writings, Bob's earliest writings, came from when he was at camp, and he wrote about Judy Rubin and Barbara. Did you know those girls, or
Yes.
were they considered his girlfriends? Tell me what you remember about that.
Yes. In fact, there was a museum here in town that had an exhibit, Bob Dylan exhibit, and there was a picture on the wall of Bob and an unknown girl. And when I was there, I said, that's not unknown, that's Judy Rubin. And so I think her name got attached to it after that point. But yeah, no, Judy Rubin was in our Sunday school. She was really a cute girl, definitely his girlfriend. I've had contact with her many years later. She wasn't very pleased with the way Bob and her related to each other at the end. I'm not sure which Barb that would be, but he was popular. He was every girl wanted to be with him in my mind, and I was lucky to find one who didn't and wanted to be with me instead. That was all I can remember.
So you must have been fairly tight with him if when he came to St. Paul, you were the one of the people he'd stay with.
Yeah, exactly. Larry, his parents weren't, they were trying to keep tight controls of him at the time, and they weren't encouraging him to have people stay at his house, even though Bob did stay there, I'm sure. I don't remember specifically. But it was just an opportunity that he would come to town and have a place to stay, and my mom was very, very cool about stuff like that, and no, sure, have him come. And then there were other people, of course. I mean, many people will tell you Bob stayed at my house, kind of like George Washington slept here. A lot of people in town, and it's true, he did stay in town. He'd come down often. He would come down on the train. I'd pick him up at the depot in St. Paul and take him wherever he was staying, if it was my house or his house or at one of the other houses. And then when it was time to leave, both Louie and Bob would take the train back up. So I would get in my car and I'd drive him to the St. Paul depot to catch the train. Many times we missed the train. We were too late. So we'd get in my car and we'd drive real fast to the Minneapolis depot and catch it at the Minneapolis depot. And that happened many times.
Was it pretty understood that Bob just was bored by the small town Hibbing life, and he was just coming down to get the big city feel and do the party scene, or
I'm
what?
not so sure that, that might be what I think he was pretty, he was definitely bored with it, but he had a life up there that was different than the rest of the town, maybe. But he was, he liked the big city. Duluth was a big city to him. He would also go to Duluth a lot to visit Louis. So I think he was had wanderlust. He just wanted to see the world, one town at a time, kind of. And look at him now. I mean, he's everywhere all the time,
Do you have any other memories of doing things besides going to parties? Are there any mundane, just like you went to a store or went to any other memories of things you did together during that time?
First of all, I got to start all this by saying, to the best of my recollection, at my age, it isn't easy to recall some things, especially what I had for lunch yesterday. But, and a lot of the incidences, all right, so just real quickly, a lot of the incidents I do recall are more recent, when we were traveling together and stuff. That's some of the interesting things that I remember. But I do remember playing the piano in Nancy's basement. That was a very significant thing. It happened frequently. And then being thrown out. I remember the card games. One time we were all down this same basement, and Louis walked in. He had cut his leg real bad, and we rushed him to the hospital. We put him in the car, and Bob was there. We took him to the hospital, and we took him to a private hospital, and we got yelled at for that. No, you take him to the general hospital. Why did you take him here? But we didn't know any better. And that was kind of an incident that Bob was around. One time, I'm not sure whether this was even after he was more famous, but there was a pool party. A friend of ours had a pool, and we were all went to the party, and Bob showed up, and yeah, he had already been quite famous, because I remember somebody saying to him, "Tell me what you meant when you wrote one of your songs, specifically." And Bob kind of looked at him strange, and he left. He walked out. Bob wasn't social. He was popular, but he definitely, the more popular he became, the more introverted he became. He's very, very. He didn't like being around a lot of people. We on tour sometimes. Well, let me not jump ahead. Let me go into
Yeah, but you did say he'd ask you to tell him about things from when you were younger. So did you get the sense he was kind of a nostalgic person?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, when we did talk over the years, he liked talking about the music, old music, what songs, Bobby V and Bobby. I mean, just old musicians. We would go to on tour. We would stop at the music venues or music locations where people had been born or died, and he was always into the past, especially around music. That was something we had in common. And at the time, I was into folk music. I was a Peter, Paul and Mary fan. I was a Kingston Trio fan, and that kind of a thing. When Bob eventually came to the university, that was kind of the next stage. Bob, I was in a fraternity. I was in a Sigma Alpha Mu fraternity, which I thought was interesting at the time. I don't look back at that as one of the more fun times, but I was there. And Bob was going to come to the university, and what I had heard is that his parents wanted him to live in a dorm. And he didn't want to live in a dorm. He wanted to live off campus. So they compromised by saying, well, you could live at the Jewish fraternity house. As long as Dickie Cohn is there, that's okay. My mom and her mom were friends. My mom and her played mahjong or canasta together, especially after Beatty moved to town here. So they were friends, and so he moved into the fraternity house, and.
Were you a year ahead of him then? Were you already there for a year, or were you getting
well,
there as a freshman too?
No, I was just, he was behind me for some reason, but I wasn't a year ahead of him in school. First of all, I don't think he ever went to school. I mean, when I was at the fraternity house, I'd be coming in the morning to go to school, and he'd be coming home from some gigs, He wasn't a student. As genius as he is, and as smart as he was, he definitely wasn't into school. He was into the music, and he was playing around campus. He played at the 10 o'clock Scholar. He played at the Triangle. He played at a place in St. Paul called the Purple Onion. And I used to go see him all the time. In fact, there'd be many times I'd be the only person in the room. Me and a girl would be the only person in the room. I was a fan of his. I followed his music. He wasn't doing a lot of original stuff early on. It was all Jerry Lee Lewis and that kind of stuff. But eventually, at the Scholar and some of those places, he would do some of his music, but more so old traditional folk music. It wasn't rock and roll anymore. It was old traditional folk music. Josh White, Leadbelly, that kind of thing. And I was fascinated by it. I loved that kind of music. We would listen to records together at the fraternity house. He had a room, one of his bedrooms, or his bedroom, where he had a sound system, not a particularly good one, but he had a bunch of records, and we'd go and I'd be sitting in there and we'd listen to his records.
As I was motivated back in town, I felt can't like something. Nobody's down. So I eased down my plate and pulled out a drive. Got my brother trying. Then I stepped inside. Then I came came to me and traded that phone. And I'll put you in a car. Go eat up the road.